keep it on the down low, but there's a sneaky good football game this upcoming Sunday that you might like. I am into it because it has this up and coming quarterback you probably haven't heard of named Patrick Mahomes. And it has Jalen Hurts too, who's okay, I guess. On a serious note, though, this is a great Super Bowl. And we're going to start off with the quarterbacks as we always do. And I'm going to get backlash, as I always do, by saying that Patrick Mahomes is my sixth best quarterback in the league this year. I don't just evaluate based on an eye test. I compile 4 advanced stats together that have been shown to be correlated with winning the most. So I combine those stats together, and that's how I arrive to the ratings for players. So Mahomes is the sixth best, and Jalen Hurts is the 10th best quarterback, according to this metric. Both quarterbacks are in the tier 2 of quarterbacks. Tier 1 is, your Joe Burrows, Lamar's, guys that just had ridiculous years this season. And tier 2 is guys that are still really, really good. The thing is, it just wasn't as consistent for either quarterback as I think they would have wanted, because Mahomes in years past has just been basically unstoppable. You blitz him, he finds the opening, you sit back in coverage, he waits all day, then he scrambles, he makes a play, or he just makes a play in the pocket even. This year, there were still elements of that, but I think it just wasn't happening on the regular basis. And as for the Eagles, I think it was kind of a similar deal, albeit in a very different look. And by that, I mean, Hertz was very feast or famine a lot of the year, but it may have gone a little bit unnoticed because the rushing attack was out of this world good, which we're going to get into that heavily later. But, Hertz was a key contributor in that aspect as well. So you might be thinking, initially that Hertz doesn't belong in the same tier as Mahomes. But I think in a lot of ways they were similar in production. And you could make the argument that, Mahomes didn't have as good of a supporting cast as Hertz. And I think that's very fair. But I'm just looking strictly at the numbers and telling you what they are. So Hertz, he wasn't passing as well, but he was rushing at a much higher level. So it kind of balanced out. And that's how they arrived to being tier 2 quarterbacks. So we're going to start off with Kansas City because Mahomes is the better quarterback. And they do not have a receiving option on their team that's in the top 50 of yards per route run, which is bonkers. Every team I've looked at this year basically has had at least one guy there. And it's with good reason. It's not too high of a requirement. It's just, be a true number 1 receiving option, or, be a high end number 2. They don't have that. I think that may surprise a lot of people because Travis Kelce has been such a good tight end for so long. He's definitely in the top 3 tight ends of all time. And, as a receiving option, he's probably number 1. So that may come, a bit surprising to you. But like Mahomes, Kelce was not his typical self throughout the season, which is, it's so funny saying this because it's like, your quarterback, the most important player, and the most important receiver for your quarterback are not their like absolute best selves for the year, and they still win, 15 games. And that goes to show just how well-rounded this team is, which again we're going to get into. And one of the ways that shows itself is with their rushing attack, where Kansas City is 13th in rushing expected points added. And that makes sense because, one, they have a great interior offensive line for run blocking. So that ensures, more oftentimes than not, they're going to have some running lanes. Pacheco is also a very good running back. So that makes sense. And additionally, they were always having the threat of the pass. Even though they weren't having the most efficient passing season this year, are you going to sell out to stop Pacheco? Or, no offense to Pacheco, but are you going to sell out to stop him? Or are you going to try to make sure Mahomes doesn't crush you? I think, you're going to focus on Mahomes. So teams were never too aggressive in trying to stop their runs. So they would be able to sprinkle in, a dive and get, 4 yards, or inside zone, get 5 yards, so on and so forth. And the matchup for the Eagles is a bit problematic, though, because the Eagles have the second best run defense in expected points added. They were a dominant force that, starts with Jalen Carter chiefly, but they also have some really good edge setters, which is crazy because Josh Sweat is more of a speed rusher and just like an athletic beast than he is regarded as being like, this run defending edge. But that's the case. Sweat is really good. And Nolan Smith is, I think, a more magnified version of that because Nolan Smith is a bit undersized for being an edge. I want to say he's about 240. Sometimes they be lying on their weights on sites, so I never feel like confident in saying anything, but I believe he is about 240, and he ran like a 4.4 40. So he is just a hyper athletic beast. So, you think, yeah, he's just going to be all speed, no strength, whatever. He's going to get pushed off the line of scrimmage very easily. No, he's like really sound as a run defender. So there's not really too much of a weakness. I think the closest thing you're going to find to a problem for the Eagles' run defense is Milton Williams, their defensive tackle, too, who they need on the field more often than not. They do have a good rotation of defensive tackles, but Milton Williams is one of the best pass rushing defensive tackles in the league. So it's good to have him out there. There will be times where, if Creed Humphrey and either of the guards are able to get a double team on Milton Williams, he might get pushed back a bit. And, you want to protect him as much as you can, but there's definitely going to be times where Milton Williams is going to have to make the play. And I think the Chiefs are going to look to isolate him because he is their weakest link. Overall, I can't give a point to the Chiefs because being 11 spots worse than the other team is not great. And I don't give points here in the defensive sides of the ball, meaning not necessarily that they play defense, but that they're being attacked. I think if you prevent the other team from getting a point, that's a point in and of itself, if that makes sense. So I do give points for defenders overall, though, because moving to the defensive side of things for the Chiefs, we have Chris Jones, who is an all-world defensive tackle and is just one of the best pass rushing interior players we've ever seen in the NFL. He's also more than an interior player, by the way. He also plays, on the edge a good bit. So it's hard to really, put him in a box, but he plays the most at defensive tackle. So that's why I'm calling him that primarily. Jones is sixth in pressures, and he missed 2 games, by the way, too. So he could have been way higher than sixth, which is terrifying. He's going to be lined up against Cam Jurgens a lot. Jurgens is the center for the Eagles. Jurgens is 34th out of 39 centers in pass blocking grade per PFF. So he's not really specializing in pass protection. And that's a problem because Chris Jones is known to destroy players that are good pass protectors. He's also, just going to rip you limb from limb if, you're not a great pass blocker. Mekhi Becton, he is not the greatest pass blocker either. It's a bit surprising because the Eagles do have maybe the best offensive line in the league. I would probably say that they do, especially when you're taking in the whole picture of run blocking and pass protection. But for here, we're just talking about pass blocking. Becton is 48th out of 73 guards, so a little bit below average. And he presents more of a, protection than Jurgens does. But again, I'm not feeling confident about almost anybody against Chris Jones. Like even the best center and guard in the league, I'm still thinking, Jones is going to get in a couple times. And what makes Jones so problematic as well is he's basically their Travis Kelce of the defense, where like Kelce will run routes that just, make sense to him and Mahomes. They're not necessarily plotted out by the team. And Jones, he'll just decide, like, I'm going to rush against the left tackle, say, and I'm going to go against, the right guard here. Like, he's going to be in charge of that. And, there's definitely going to be times because Spagnuolo is a great blitzing defensive coordinator, and this team lives for the blitz, where Jurgens is going to be one-on-one with Chris Jones, and I don't think Jurgens is going to hold up too well. Jurgens is a very good player. He's just not a good pass protector. And, if they get the Eagles, that is, if they get into passing downs and distances where it's like, 3rd and 7, you are going to be in a world of hurt, perhaps, if you're the Eagles, because Jurgens is just, not going to be in a favorable matchup whatsoever. I think Jones will also go after Becton, even though, like I said, Becton is a bit better in pass protection. Jones is just a madman. He will go after anybody. I think he's not going to be on the edge basically at all this game. I could be wrong, but Jordan Mailata is PFF's number 1 graded offensive lineman, not just tackle, in the league. And Lane Johnson is, I'd say, one of the 5 best offensive tackles in the league. So you would love to see that matchup, just immense talent against immense talent. But I don't think that's the best use of Chris Jones. I think him just completely dominating a lesser talent is probably the way to go. And I think that's what the Chiefs will do. So that is a point for the Chiefs. And the next possible advantage is with George Karlaftis, who is 15th in pressures. He is going against the aforementioned Lane Johnson, who, according to PFF, is 6th out of 80 tackles in pass blocking grade. So maybe I exaggerated when I said Johnson's top 5. He's actually, 6th according to PFF. Maybe that's too much. Either way, Johnson is very good. He's also really good as a run blocker, so I'd say, that takes him up a little bit, but I digress. Karlaftis, I think he stands a chance against Johnson because Karlaftis is kind of quirky. He's not like other girls. No, he's not like other edge rushers. And by that, I mean he's very, very power based. He's got a big body and he knows how to use it. He's very just physical at the point of attack. He's got, great power overall. Johnson, he's not, small or anything. Like, he's a big tackle. And there's basically no deficiencies in his game, I wouldn't say. But it just is a little bit of something, a change of pace that, could be problematic for the Eagles. Just because Karlaftis, is going to be a lot of the time just taking it to Johnson with power. And I think Johnson can very well hold up, but it's just, a possibility. So I'm not going to give a point there because I do lean on the side of Johnson being the better player in this matchup. And I think Karlaftis is still a great player in his own right. It's just he's not maybe, one of the 5 best at his position like Johnson is. Switching now to the other side of the ball, the other team rather, we get AJ Brown for the Eagles, who is 2nd in yards per route run. This is going to be one of the best matchups of the year. He is going against Trent McDuffie, who's PFF's 5th out of 118 corners in PFF coverage. So, top 5 versus top 5. McDuffie, I believe, was PFF's 2nd best corner holistically. So, McDuffie is really good. And he likes to follow receivers. And he likes to get physical with them. That's a common theme with these teams. They are rather physical. I live for it. McDuffie, he is going to be on Brown a lot. And I think I'm going to say that this is going to be weird. I think that just personally, I think Brown's going to have the advantage because McDuffie, though he is this monster of a corner, he is 82nd in PFF man coverage grade. So that's going to be a bit of an issue when Spagnuolo gets to blitzing or just, when they're mixing up and, playing man coverage on just a regular down. I could see Brown, getting or running a slant and getting, some separation and, breaking a long run after catch off, something like that where McDuffie, I think, is going to do great for the majority of the game. But there's going to be moments where he is going to be in man coverage. And I don't love the prospects of that. So I'm not giving a point to Brown because I do think that it's more speculative with him. But I would say that alarms me a little bit just because McDuffie, he's in man coverage roughly 30% of the time. I think it's exactly 30% of the time where he's in coverage. So that's a good chunk. The average for a corner is about 26%. So 4 percentage points higher for McDuffie. And, they might be doing that even more because they're going to be blitzing Hurts and Barkley more, you know, correctly a lot of the time. So there may be a lot of man opportunities, and that's an opportunity for Brown to show off his skills and be the dominant receiver that he is. So I talked a lot about this for not giving any point either way, but I think it's a very good matchup. Another very good matchup is Devonta Smith, who is 26th in yards per route run, versus Chamari Connor. Connor is 57th out of 116 in PFF coverage for corners, and he's 53rd in man coverage, so he's remarkably consistent in that sense. Smith, I'll just be, forthcoming about this. I'm giving the point to Smith here. The stats back Smith. He is a very good receiver. Like, he could be a number one receiver for a lot of teams. I don't know how many. I'm not, I didn't plan to talk about that, but he could be a wide receiver one for some teams for sure. And he's behind a top 4 wide receiver in the league in AJ Brown. So we kind of don't, focus on Smith so very much, but Smith is very good. And I think Connor's going to take note of that, because Connor is a very solid nickel corner, and I have no gripes with him in most matchups, but I do think Smith's going to be in the slot again for a lot of the time, because that's just how they've been using him. And I think Connor is going to have a hard time keeping up with him. Again, they play a lot of man coverage in Kansas City. I don't love that matchup for the Chiefs. So I think, that's another matchup you want to kind of circle, because it could very much be a telling sort of, example of how the game itself is going to go. Because if Smith doesn't do well, which, there is that chance because Connor is a solid player, I think that is, very difficult for the Eagles then, because obviously they want to run the ball, but, you have to pass at least a little bit. And, if Smith isn't a viable option, that means you're strictly relying on AJ Brown and Dallas Goedert. And, 3 receiving options is not great. You're hoping for 4, but 2 is really, really rough. So, yeah, if Smith doesn't have a good game, I think that Hurts is going to be in for a long day, because I think, there's going to be a lot of blitzing coming his way, and, he's not going to have his number 2 read. And, at that point, the Chiefs could sell out more to stop Brown, and everything just kind of snowballs at that point, where, it seems like you're just losing your number 2 option, but in reality, it's like things get harder for Brown, and Hurts is not having time in the pocket, and he's going to start panicking, and he might not be making the greatest plays, or he might be holding onto the ball too long. That could be very, very difficult. But overall, I do think more often than not, Smith is going to win this matchup. So I'm giving the point to the Eagles. So we're at 1 point each. And now we have Dallas Goedert, who is such a good player as well. He is 18th in yards per route run for all players, not just tight ends, all players. And he's going against some really good players as well. There's just great matchup after great matchup. Nick Bolton, 21st out of 84 linebackers in PFF coverage grade. Drew Tranquil, 27th out of those 84 linebackers. So I can't give a point to Goddard here. He's a great player, but he's going against, great players as well. So Goddard is definitely going to, I think, be a contributor no matter what, because he can always kind of find holes in zones. He has a good awareness in that regard, and he is athletic, so he can, outrun some people if they set like a pick. And he's also just liable to, get past the receiver with good route, or not get past the receiver, get past the defender with good route running. So he has a lot of options to contribute, but I'm not banking on him being, an advantageous player for the Eagles. I think he's just going to be someone that can contribute. And for where Philly's bread is buttered, their run game, they are, as you could imagine, number one in rushing expected points added, which is just the perfect culmination of all things, as Saquon Barkley had one of the best rushing years of all time and is, obviously one of the best running backs in the league. Then they also have the most versatile line in the league, I would say pretty handedly, as they are the heaviest line in the league, which surprised me when I heard that, because like for me, when I think of Philly's line, I think of one, them being masters of the tush push, but two, them being pretty speedy. And that's actually the case as well. They are very chunky and they are very athletic at the same time. It is an unfair, you know, just distribution of talent that they have, because looking at their offensive line, Jordan Mailata, he is like 365, I want to say. Yeah, 365, 6'8". He runs like, not like the fastest, but like a tight end. And Cam Jurgens, he was regarded as being the next Jason Kelsey. That's obviously too much of, to put on a young player or basically any player. But he was regarded as Kelsey because, one, Kelsey took him under his wing, but two, Jurgens is super athletic in the same vein that Kelsey was. And Jurgens, he's 303 pounds. He's the lightest guy by far on their line. I think the next latest guy is like 335. I think it's Landon Dickerson, 332. Dickerson might be the least athletic guy on their line. And I would still say, like, for his size, he's an above average athlete. So that, like, kind of paints a picture of just how ridiculous their situation is. Lane Johnson, he's 325. He ran a 4.72 40. That is genuinely like a slow tight end speed. And he's 325, 6'6". They have a ridiculous thing going on. And Mekhi Becton, he's like 6'8", 363. Oh my gosh. They got a lot going for them. And they can consequently run wide zone if they want, because they have the athletes to get upfield like that. They can run power and just move people off, the line of scrimmage. They can do it all. So that makes them even more difficult to go against, because you never know exactly what you're going to get. And with Hurts, he just pulls everything together so nicely. If you have any of these components working together, you're going to have a great rushing attack. You put them all together and it just becomes just too much. Hurts is a very good runner. As far as rushing quarterbacks, I would say that, one is Lamar, two is probably Daniels, three, maybe Fields, and I would say probably four is Hurts. Hurts is in the conversation for basically anybody over or after Lamar, though. So maybe I missed somebody obvious, but those are just who came to mind for me. So Hurts is, at the top of the league in rushing. I guess Allen is another great, rushing quarterback. Hurts, though, he's very physical for a quarterback. Like, beyond the tush push, he is a very jacked man. And, he can take it to a defensive back if the need arises. So that's a great dynamic. You add in the read option factor where defenders have to respect Hurts keeping the ball so they can't rush after Barkley. That takes a defender out of the equation in the run game. It just, I don't know how you stop it. I think Spagnuolo is going to maybe show a blueprint for how you do it because, if anybody can stop what they're doing, it's him. He is one of the best defensive minds of all time. But yeah, you're going to have to blitz a lot. And if you blitz, Barkley makes one guy miss, it's a 60-yard touchdown. So, you're kind of at a loss no matter what you do. So, with that said, Kansas City has their hands full, especially because they're 11th in run defense expected points added. That's, that's going to be great for every team, basically, but Philly. And, they're going against Philly. So, with that said, I do think the Chiefs have, some chance to defend the run, as they will be blitzing a lot, which they already do. They might just be, run blitzing more than they are pass blitzing. And, they're going to have lots of bodies at the line of scrimmage at all times. But I think that might be a very big issue. And another issue is with Josh Sweat, whose name I always struggle a bit with. He is 27th in pressures for all players, going against Jawan Taylor, who is 40th out of 80 tackles. So he is as average as it gets in pass blocking, according to PFF. Taylor, I don't think this is the matchup he wants. Because, yes, he can false start on every play, and that give him, a little bit of an advantage with getting depth for the speed that Sweat has. But if that's not in play, that's going to be, I think, a big issue for him, because Sweat, I think I undersold this when I was talking about him before. Sweat is 265 pounds, mind you. He is massive. He is one of the bigger edges in the league nowadays. But yet, he still did run that 4.53 40. Sweat is, liable to run past Taylor, because I think Taylor is, just not the greatest athlete. Sweat is going to be taking him way wide on passing situations. And, Taylor's going to have to get out of his stance very quickly. And I think there might be times where Taylor is so worried about the speed element, he's going to forget that Sweat is liable to bring power to the equation as well. And in which case, Taylor could be in for some trouble that way as well. Overall, Sweat being 27th in pressures, Taylor being 40th in pass blocking. I give the nod to Sweat, giving them their third point. And we get to another very interesting matchup in Jalen Carter, who is 31st out of all players in pressures, versus Trey Smith, who is 30th out of 73 guards in pass blocking, according to PFF. Carter is very dominant, but I think Smith is going to present a good fight for him. I normally would say, Carter is the best interior guy, therefore he's going to get doubled a good amount. He still might, but I think they're going to reserve their doubling for Milton Williams, and I'll explain why in a little bit. I think Carter is going to have Trey Smith on him because Mike Caliendo is terrible, and he's going to need help. So Milton Williams is the lesser of the defensive tackles. PFF has Milton Williams as having the better pass rushing grade. I don't believe that. But either way, Carter is lined up over the right guard most of the time, basically all of the time. And that's, Trey Smith. So I think it's going to be a lot of Carter on Smith, which, if I had to pick, I would say Carter is probably going to have, the advantage just because I think Carter is a little bit higher end of a talent than Smith is. Smith is very good, though. Like, that's not a knock on him. But I'm not giving anybody a point here. It's too close to say, Carter is, better than the stats say or whatever. Like, no, Smith is going to make this difficult for him. And as I mentioned before, Mike Caliendo, he's really bad. He's 68 out of 73 guards in pass blocking. And he's going to be, I think, getting some help from Creed Humphrey. Caliendo, one-on-one versus Milton Williams, who is second in PFF pass rushing grade for defensive tackles. That doesn't sit right with me. So that's why I think Humphrey is going to be helping Caliendo a lot. And I think, Smith is going to be on Carter specifically a lot. But I think Vic Fangio, he doesn't blitz the most, but he blitzes a good, at good times. Oftentimes, I think he's going to offer up some blitzes that are specifically just to get Caliendo on an island. Where, like, yeah, if they get a linebacker in free, great. If not, get Caliendo on Milton Williams, and it's functionally going to be a blitz. I also think, there's going to be some stunts. I think, just any way to specifically get after Caliendo, I think they're going to look to do. So I think that, that's an issue, but I think Creed Humphrey is so good that, if he can take on Milton Williams by himself, like he could take Jalen Carter on by himself as well. It's not to say that he would, win every single rep, but I think that, Humphrey is good enough to win one-on-one versus basically anybody. And, if he's getting Caliendo's, like moral support as he double teams or whatever Caliendo supplies, even more so, that's going to be good for Humphrey. So, I'm not giving a point there either, just because Humphrey is going to be an eraser, I think. But with that said, we have a score of 3-1 for the Eagles. Do I think that Mahomes, being the 6th best quarterback, is enough to outweigh Hurts being the 10th best quarterback and having, 2 points of team advantage? I do not. I think this is definitely a Super Bowl where, you can pick either team and be just fine. But if I have to pick a team to win based in logic, I'm going with the Eagles. They have just an absolute ridiculous grouping of talent. The only thing that worries me is Hurts not handling the blitz very well. But I just look at the matchups one by one. I think, Philly, I like them there. I like them, there. Just so on and so forth. I think this is going to be a hard fought victory. But I think the Eagles are up for the task. So that's my pick. Those are my thoughts on the Super Bowl. Be sure to let me know what yours are in the comment section. And also be sure to like and subscribe for more football content.